boys and girls, and welcome to the concession stand here on the KB Radio Network. I am your host, Kevin Reed, and this is the review of the new bio sports drama written and directed by Sean Durkin, The Iron Claw, which stars Zac Efron along with Jeremy Allen White and Lily James. And this is a wrestling film, but it's based on a true story. But it's not just a quote unquote wrestling film. This is a film based on the life of professional wrestler Kevin Von Erich, who is portrayed by Zac Efron and the Von Erich family. And this is something near and dear to me because I grew up, scratch that, I still watch professional wrestling. I am a huge wrestling fan. I love the WWE. And what started it for me were the Saturday night, I guess it was world class professional wrestling that used to come on late on Saturday nights, at least where I grew up. And I watched the Von Erichs, I should say. And I was a huge fan of the Von Erichs. I used to watch them religiously every Saturday. And that got me into professional wrestling. Started watching WWF at the time, and Hulk Hogan and Ultimate Warrior and Macho Man. And, you know, then we had the Ric Flairs and WCW and so on and so forth. And I was hooked. I was hooked. And the Von Erichs were one of my favorite group of wrestlers. They were all brothers. And I watched them, you know, just run rumshot, you know, in this little promotion. And I used to always dream of them going to the WWF, which it was called at the time, and, you know, taking their talents to the world so the world could see. But it just didn't work out that way. One did end up going, and he didn't last too long. I think that was Kerry Van Erich. He was the Texas Tornado. But yeah, man, this film, ooh boy, I was highly anticipating this movie because of my love for the Van Erichs, and I knew the story of the Van Erichs. I know what happened. So nothing that happened in this film shocked and surprised me. You know, it wasn't like, oh my God, that happened. No, I knew, you know, but to see it played out on screen was a different experience altogether. The synopsis of this film, it centers around the Von Erich family, a dynasty of professional wrestlers from Texas that had an enormous success in the 1980s and popularized the Iron Claw professional wrestling hold. However, they not only had to battle inside the ring, but they also had to fight the Von Erich curse outside of it, a string of unbearable personal tragedies. Man, this is the most gut-wrenching movie you're probably going to watch this year, but it is one of the best films you're going to watch this year. The Iron Claw was such a tour de force, such a masterpiece of a film. I cannot express my love for this in words. I've been trying to gather the words since I left the theater, and I cannot put it together. I can't formulate the right words to display my love for this film. It is so well done from every aspect: the acting, the directing, the writing, the wrestling in this film. You know, getting a kind of a peek behind the curtain of how wrestling works, and it was just a joy to watch. And one of my biggest loves of this film is the fact that you don't have to be a professional wrestling fan to enjoy this movie. It helps. It helps, but there is a human story here. The wrestling is just the cherry on top of the cupcake, man. But the story, the brotherhood, literally, is Like, oh my God, this is beautiful. This is beautiful. Let's start with our cast here. Zac Efron as Kevin Von Erich. He has a, well, let me just say, Zac Efron, he's the star, and he carries this film with such an emotional weight, such a presence. And I mean that literally and figuratively. He is huge. He got jacked up. Now Zac Efron was always a, a well kept fella, but my God, he was a beast. I mean, he he looked like a medium sized Arnold Schwarzenegger. I can't think of a way to describe him. He is huge. He is huge, and but it works. you know, it works, and I love the fact that he is the oldest, even though technically he's not the oldest because his older brother passed when they were. I think he said he was 5 years old, and so technically he's not the oldest, but he is now because his older brother passed away when they were children. And so he's the big brother. He's like the caretaker over his younger brothers. And you felt the love. You felt the love that he had for his brothers. It was such a beautiful thing. And that's collectively, I'm not going to break them all down one by one, but they all did an excellent job as the Von Erich brothers. And their relationship, their chemistry, you really believed that they were brothers. This was perfectly cast. All of them, all of them were so good, and individually they were great. But when they were together, you they were brothers. You know, it was like a documentary. It wasn't a film at that point because it was so authentic. Their chemistry was perfect. I mean, it was so good. And it had to be good when we get towards the end of this film. And well, throughout this film, when tragedy happens after tragedy after tragedy, and you feel the weight of every single event. And it's like, oh my God, it's just gut wrenching. And you know why. It's no secret why this is happening. And this curse, this quote unquote Von Erich curse that is plaguing his family, um, you start to question, is it real? Towards the middle of the film, you're like, is this an actual thing? Did somebody put a hex on this family? Because it was just inundated with tragedy. Nothing was natural. Everything was tragic. And oh my God, it was just gut wrenching. The father portrayed by Hoyt McCallum, who plays Fitz Von Erich, who I wanted to choke him to death. I wanted to kill him. This was a father. I mean, bruh, this was the most. There were worse fathers that you've seen on screen or known in real life. Don't get me wrong, but the way Hoyt played this character, who is a real guy, all this was authentic, all this was real. They stuck to the story verbatim. This dude was just horrible, horrible, and his sons loved him to death. I mean, they looked up to him. It was never hatred per se towards him, but it was more of a respect thing. It was a fear thing, and Hoy played it great. He played it great throughout this film. But Zac Efron, Zac Efron, I'm telling you, if Zac Efron don't get any award consideration for his portrayal of Kevin Von Erich, this is a travesty. I mean, travesty. He really, really delivered in this film in a way that I haven't seen Zac Efron deliver in a role before. I go to the grave shouting that. This was an awesome performance. This entire ensemble cast, this is probably the best ensemble cast you're gonna find anywhere. you know, anywhere. Moving on to the wrestling. This was one of the best wrestling I've seen in a film ever. Ever. This was so well done. It felt real. It felt like I was watching NXT or WWE, it felt real. And these actors really were in the ring. They were taking the bumps. They were running the ropes. They were doing the dives off of the ropes, top ropes and stuff. I was like, man, they really went all in on this movie. There were no stunt double. I'm pretty sure they had stunt doubles in there, but for the most part, I it was authentic and it felt real. It felt like you was actually engaged in these matches, and it just made the film feel that much more real. Um, I I, I only have one flaw in this movie, and it's one, and this is for the wrestling fans. If you're not a wrestling fan, you probably don't even care. You probably won't even notice. But if you're a wrestling fan, there is one particular casting choice that they made in this movie that was horrible. And I mean horrible. It was so horrible for 5 minutes, it took me out of the movie. As great as this movie is, and I mean close to perfect, one casting decision, and it isn't a main character. It isn't a character that's going to affect the story in any way. They could have cut the character out and it would have been just as great. But it was like a 5 minute scene that this character was in, and it took me out for those 5 minutes. Now it got me back quickly because of the film, how it was written and everything. But just for those 5 minutes, and it wouldn't have took me out if they would have cast somebody else. And yeah, I'm going to spoil it. The Ric Flair, the character or the actor who portrayed Ric Flair, did not do a good job. Ric Flair is one of my favorites. I could the promo work that Ric Flair did throughout his career is like second to none. And they had him do a promo, and it was so bad. It was so bad. I'm like, man, this is not Ric Flair. I went and saw it with my best friend, who is a wrestling fan and as well, and immediately we both leaned over and said, "Man, who is this?" It was like, man, this is horrible. Um, it was that bad. I'm telling you, it was that bad. But they got us back in it, and it worked out. It worked out for the good going forward. But overall, this film was excellent. I'll say this at the end of this movie: if you're not crying, if you're not touched in any way, if you're not hurting for the Von Erich family, you don't have a soul. This movie will rip your heart out. And especially if you're if you come from a big family and you've lost loved ones and in tragic fashion, this would tear you apart. I look, I come from a relatively big family, but we didn't have any tragedies per se. Recently we did, but it wasn't a lot. It wasn't every single death in the family was a tragedy. Every single death in the Von Erich family was a tragedy. And I don't I can't I'm telling you, this is horrible. And this is real. And that's what really hurts you, because this is real. This is fact. This isn't fabricated for a movie. This is actual facts that took place in real life. And it with that in your mind and you watching it, oh man, it's gonna tear you apart. And the final scene with Zac Efron. Oh my god, it was Niagara Falls, people. It was Niagara Falls. I was a baby in there, but I wasn't the only one. It was grown men. I was in the theater with a bunch of grown men, and the majority of us were crying. There was no. They say there's no crying in baseball, but it was crying in this movie. It was that touching. It was that sad, I guess you could say. Oh, bruh, what a movie. What a movie. It really does move you emotionally, and makes you appreciate your family more. It'll draw you closer to your family. And in a weird way, the fact that this came out around Christmas time is kind of fitting. It is. And I kid you not. It kind of puts things in perspective for you. And so I appreciate it for that. Man, look, the Iron Claw gets a letter grade of an A. This is probably one of the best films to come out this year. I was trying to think of a number. It's definitely top 5, but I don't know where I would place it. But it is one of the best films I've seen this year. It is emotionally gut wrenching. It also has some funny parts in it. It isn't all depressed. It has some funny parts. It has some exciting parts. Crowd pleasing parts and everything. It reaches every emotion that you want when you go see a film, and I can't tip my hat far enough to the filmmakers and the actors and everybody involved in this film, The Iron Claw. I would like to know, are you planning to check it out? Have you checked it out? Let me know your thoughts. Email the show, kbradiopodcast@gmail.com. You can also contact the show on social media. Just search for the KB Radio Network on all social media platforms. Subscribe to the KB Radio Network channel on YouTube and like this video. Also, don't forget about the 5 stars, the reviews, and sharing this show. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, wherever you are currently listening to the Concession Stand here on the KB Radio Network. Everybody, thank you for joining me for this review of The Iron Claw. Can't wait to speak to you again. I want you all to know that I love you. Continue to love everyone. And until we speak again, you all be blessed.